Story 1: The Knife in the Firelight. I'd been a park ranger at Blackwood National Forest for 6 years, my boots worn thin from countless patrols through its dense pines and shadowed ravines. I thought I knew every trail, every sound the forest could make. But that August night in 2023 shattered that illusion. The air was heavy, the kind of humid stillness that clings to your skin and muffles the world, leaving only the crunch of gravel underfoot. My partner, Jenna, and I were on a routine patrol near Willow Creek, a remote corner of the park where cell service was a cruel joke and the nearest help was an hour's drive. Around 11 p.m., our radio crackled with a report of a disturbance at Campsite 47, screaming, breaking glass, and what dispatch described as hostile behavior. My stomach knotted as we hiked the 2 miles through the moonless dark, our flashlights carving thin beams through the oppressive blackness. The forest was too quiet, the usual chorus of crickets and owls replaced by an unnatural hush that made my skin prickle. When we reached the site, the campfire roared unnaturally high, its flames licking at the low branches, casting grotesque shadows that danced like specters on the trees. 4 men in their 20s, their clothes stained with dirt and sweat, stood in a loose circle, their laughter sharp and jagged. The reek of whiskey hit me first, followed by the glint of a hunting knife in the hand of the tallest, a bald man with a crooked grin that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze locked onto me, and I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. "Evening, folks," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm despite the hammering in my ribs. "You here to ruin our fun, Ranger?" the bald man slurred, twirling the knife with a casual menace that made my mouth go dry. Jenna's hand hovered near her radio, but the static told us backup wasn't coming anytime soon. The other 3 men stepped closer, their eyes gleaming with a feral intensity, and I realized this wasn't just a drunken outburst. This was something darker, something deliberate. The air shifted, thick with the promise of violence. Before I could try to de-escalate, the bald man lunged, the knife slicing through the air with a whistle that froze my blood. I jerked back, the blade grazing my sleeve, tearing the fabric and nicking my arm. A sharp sting followed by the warm trickle of blood. Jenna shouted for them to stand down, her voice cracking as she fumbled for her pepper spray. The other 3 moved like a pack, one snatching a jagged bottle from the ground, another hefting a smoldering log from the fire, its end glowing red. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst, and every instinct screamed to run. But the forest was a labyrinth of shadows, and we were miles from safety. I sprayed the bald man, the mist hitting his face, and he screamed, clawing at his eyes, the knife clattering to the dirt. But the others were on us in an instant. One tackled Jenna, slamming her to the ground with a sickening thud, and I threw myself at him, my fist connecting with his jaw in a desperate, clumsy strike. Pain exploded in my knuckles, but adrenaline kept me moving. Another grabbed my collar, yanking me back, and a fist caught my lip, splitting it open. The taste of blood filled my mouth, metallic and warm, as I fought to free Jenna. We broke free and ran, stumbling into the trees, their shouts chasing us like hounds. Branches clawed at my face, and my lungs burned as we dove behind a massive oak, crouching in the damp earth. Their flashlights swept the woods, their voices low and guttural, taunting us with promises of pain. "Come out, our world, we'll find you," the bald man roared, his voice thick with rage. My mind raced with images of my wife and daughter, the life I might never return to, and I clutched Jenna's trembling hand, her breaths shallow and panicked. We stayed there, frozen in terror, as their lights passed inches from our hiding spot. Hours dragged by, my body aching from the cold and fear, until the gray light of dawn revealed they'd vanished. Back at the station, battered and bloodied, we found their campsite trashed, the knife still lying in the dirt, its blade crusted with my blood. The police never found them, and I still wake up gasping, their laughter echoing in my nightmares. The knife's glint burned into my memory. Story 2. The Trap in the Valley. The Smoky Mountains were my sanctuary, their mist-shrouded peaks and emerald valleys, a place where I felt alive as a park ranger. But after that October night in 2023, the wilderness became a labyrinth of terror, its beauty forever stained by fear. I was stationed at the Cades Cove Outpost, a quiet post where my days were spent guiding lost hikers, checking permits, and warning campers about black bears rummaging through poorly secured food. That evening, I was alone, finishing a routine sweep of the campsites along Abrams Creek as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching under my boots, and the valley was silent save for the distant hoot of an owl and the faint gurgle of the creek. At Campsite 12, something felt off. The tent was pitched, but no one answered when I called out, my voice swallowed by the heavy air. The fire pit was cold, its ashes undisturbed, and a half-eaten meal sat abandoned on the picnic table, the food crawling with ants, the plate smeared with what looked like dried blood. My radio spat static, useless in the valley's dead zone, and a chill crept up my spine, unrelated to the cooling air. I scanned the site, my flashlight catching glints of something metallic in the grass. A set of keys, a broken watch, things left behind in a hurry. My gut screamed at me to leave, but my training kept me rooted, checking for signs of trouble. A rustle behind me made me spin, my light pinning a wiry man in his 30s, his face gaunt and unshaven, standing at the clearing's edge. His eyes were sunken, hollowed by something more than fatigue, and he gripped a hatchet, its blade catching the light in a way that turned my stomach to ice. "Everything okay here?" I asked, my voice wavering despite my effort to sound calm. He didn't answer, just stared, his lips twitching into a faint, unsettling smile. Then 2 more figures emerged from the trees, a woman with matted hair and wild, bloodshot eyes, and a younger man with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Their clothes were filthy, torn at the seams, and their movements were too precise, too coordinated, like predators stalking prey. My hand hovered over my pepper spray, but the air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The woman moved first, lunging with a speed that caught me off guard, her fingers clamping onto my arm, nails digging into my flesh until I felt the skin break. I yanked free, pain flaring, but the hatchet man charged, swinging the blade in a wild arc that missed my ear by inches, the air hissing with its passage. I sprinted toward the trail, my flashlight beam jerking wildly, illuminating gnarled roots and twisted branches that seemed to claw at me. Their footsteps pounded behind, heavy and relentless, their breaths ragged with exertion or excitement. I couldn't tell which. My boots slipped on wet leaves and I tripped over a root, my knee slamming into the ground, pain shooting through me like a jolt of electricity. I scrambled up, my hands slick with sweat and dirt, my heart thundering in my ears. The forest closed in, its shadows swallowing the path, and I veered into the underbrush, branches tearing at my uniform, snagging my hair. The woman's voice rang out, shrill and accusing. "You're snooping where you don't belong." Her words sent a shiver through me, and I realized this wasn't random. They'd lured me here, the abandoned campsite, a carefully laid trap. I slid into a narrow ravine, crouching behind a moss-covered boulder, my breath ragged, my knee throbbing, blood seeping through my torn pants. Their flashlights swept the darkness, their voices low and venomous, muttering about teaching me a lesson and making sure I don't talk. My body shook, my mind flooded with images of my parents, my sister, the people I might never see again. The younger man's boots crunched nearby, so close I could smell the sour reek of his sweat, and I pressed myself into the damp earth, certain they'd hear my heartbeat. They lingered, their lights flickering like malevolent eyes, their laughter cold and mocking. I stayed in the ravine for hours, my body numb from the cold, my mind replaying every sound, every glint of that hatchet. At dawn, I crept back to the outpost, limping, my uniform shredded, my skin scratched and bleeding. My truck's tires were slashed, the words "Stay out" carved into the hood with a blade's cruel precision. The police found no trace of the campers, only whispers of a rogue group living off-grid, targeting rangers who strayed too close to their secrets. I transferred to a desk job, but the forest's silence haunts me. I check my locks twice, wake up to every creak, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear their voices, carried on the wind, promising they're not done with me. Story 3. The Ambush at Midnight. The Ozarks were my home as a park ranger, their rugged trails and winding rivers a place where I felt grounded, in control. But that July night in 2024 at Buffalo National River turned my world into a nightmare I can't escape, a scar on my soul that festers with every memory. I was nearing the end of my shift, the humidity thick and oppressive, the fireflies blinking like tiny ghosts in the undergrowth, casting fleeting glows across the dense foliage. A call came in about a fight at Campsite 19, deep in the backcountry where the trails twisted through thick woods and rocky outcrops, miles from civilization. I grabbed my gear, flashlight, pepper spray, a small first aid kit, and hiked out alone, my boots crunching on the gravel path, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth, pine, and something faintly sour, like rotting fruit. The trail was narrow, the trees closing in, their branches forming a canopy that blocked the stars. My flashlight beam felt feeble against the darkness, and a nagging unease settled in my gut, growing with every step. When I reached Campsite 19, the scene was chaos. 2 men and a woman, all in their late 20s, screaming at each other, their voices raw and jagged. Their campsite was a wreck, overturned chairs, spilled food crawling with insects, broken bottles glinting in the firelight. Their eyes were wild, their movements jerky, like they were high on something far stronger than alcohol, meth, maybe, or worse. I tried to calm them, introducing myself, my voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking through me. The woman, her blonde hair stringy and matted with sweat, pointed a trembling finger at me, her face contorted with paranoia. "You're one of them, aren't you?" she hissed, her words dripping with venom. I didn't understand, my mind racing to make sense of her accusation, but before I could ask, the stocky man with a neck tattoo, a crude skull inked in fading black, grabbed a metal tent stake, its tip sharpened to a wicked point, and charged. I dove behind a tree, the stake grazing my shoulder, tearing my uniform and slicing my skin. Blood seeped through the fabric, warm and sticky, and my radio spat useless static, confirming I was alone, miles from help, my heart pounding like a war drum. I ran, my boots slipping on loose gravel, their shouts echoing like a pack of wolves on the hunt, their voices sharp and coordinated as they split up to flank me. My shoulder burned, the pain a constant pulse, and my flashlight's beam danced wildly, illuminating twisted branches that seemed to reach for me, their shadows morphing into claws on the forest floor. I stumbled into a clearing and froze. 2 of them were already there, waiting, their faces twisted with a sickening glee that turned my blood to ice. They'd planned this, I realized, my stomach plummeting, my mind screaming that this was no random attack. The woman swung a thick branch at my head, the air whistling as I ducked, my reflexes barely saving me. I tackled her to the ground, her nails raking my face, drawing blood that stung in the humid air. We wrestled in the dirt, her strength unnatural, her breath hot and sour as she spat curses, accusing me of spying and working for them. I broke free, my face throbbing, and sprinted toward the river, its icy current my only hope of escape. The rocks were slippery, the water biting into my skin as I waded in, the cold shocking my system, my wounds stinging like fire. I hid among the reeds on the far bank, my body shaking, my teeth chattering, my mind clinging to thoughts of my family, my wife's laugh, my son's small hand in mine, to keep from breaking. Their flashlights swept the bank, their voices taunting, promising pain, their laughter chilling me more than the water. "We know you're here, Ranger," the tattooed man bellowed, his voice thick with malice. They lingered, their lights flickering like predatory eyes, their footsteps crunching closer, then retreating, only to return again, as if they were toying with me. I stayed in the water for hours, half frozen, my wounds festering, my mind replaying her words. You're one of them. What did she mean? Who were they? The questions gnawed at me, fueling my terror. At dawn, I crawled out, my body numb, my uniform sodden and torn. I staggered back to the station, finding their gear gone, the campsite eerily clean as if they'd never been there. The police found no trace, only rumors of a transient group targeting rangers for reasons no one could explain. I still patrol those trails, my hand never far from my pepper spray, but every rustle makes my heart race, every shadow hides their faces. I lie awake, her words echoing, and I check my windows, my doors, convinced they're out there, watching, waiting to finish what they started.